Coaches Take on Work is a community of coaches sharing our perspectives on work today. Come for the spicy takes and stay for the quick tools and tips. Find everything from best practices in management and leadership to our thoughts on trending topics in work and some fun things you may not be expecting.
The power of what is that kind of analysis paralysis? That's
a real thing.
I know.
It is a real thing.
I know.
Yeah.
It happens.
Okay.
All of us.
Yeah. So let's get started.
Let's take action.
Awesome. Yeah, let's take action. So welcome to another episode of Coaches Take on Work. Today we'll be talking about another one of our go-to tools, the SBI feedback framework. So my name is Anna Lati, and I will be your host for today's episode. I'm the founding coach of Talent Squared. I help leaders and team members lean into their strengths and potential to exponentiate talent. So as I mentioned, we'll be talking about Center for Creative Leadership's tool, SBI, which stands for Situation, Behavior, Impact. And we've actually added one more element to it, ask. So it's SBI+A, which is Situation, Behavior, Impact, Ask, just to round it out a little bit. And we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. I have my lovely co-host, Chelsea, co-hosts. My tongue is just not working today. My mouth is like, it's 7:30 p.m. here in Finland, so I'm already done for the day. So we'll see how this goes.
We're in the midnight oil.
Things are tongue twisters right now. Either way, lovely co-host Chelsea Side and Jaclyn Cook, who are here to talk about this tool. So Chelsea, tell us a little bit about yourself before we hear about Jaclyn, and then dive into actually talking about this tool.
Of course. So as Anna shared, I'm Chelsea Side. I am the founder and chief consultant and coach at Talent Praxis, where I help people turn ideas into actions. And this feedback tool has been a favorite of mine for quite some time. And Anna and I think, originally started collaborating and making resources on this together. So it's special to get to talk about this tool with you both. But really, I just appreciate it because it's simple, easy to memorize, and you'll hear that as a common theme with things I appreciate, and also demystifies a lot of the elusive nature of feedback. And so while it's a really simple, easy to memorize tool, it makes the challenges around feedback approachable to managers and leaders and really anyone communicating in any part of their life. So excited to get into it with you all.
Wonderful. So Jaclyn, give us a short intro to you, and then we'll talk more about SBI.
Perfect. I am Jaclyn Cook. I'm the founder of Jaclyn Cook Coaching. As a certified coach, I focus on leadership, productivity, and personal finance coaching. My approach to that is really using the power of coaching to help unlock people's potentials and insights so they can have a greater impact in and out of work. And that's similar to Chelsea, why I love this feedback tool and the idea of incorporating feedback in general, because it is something that can be really powerful to help people develop, help them excel. And also with this simple tool, we can help give leaders the confidence to actually deliver feedback effectively. And so I'm excited to share, to Chelsea's point, demystify the idea of feedback and how easy it can be. That's the challenge for us, to highlight that. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, awesome. So Chelsea, why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit more about what makes SBI+A such an amazing tool? What do we need to know?
Yeah, I'll start with the basics of the formula, and Anna said some of this earlier, but the formula is to state the situation at hand, to basically give enough context that the person you're talking to knows what you're talking about, to state the behavior that you observed. And so observable is a really important word here. This needs to be something that's objective, observable, not something that's evaluative or subjective, meaning a fly on the wall or a secret hidden camera would agree with you. Anyone watching the situation from bird's eye view would say, yes, that's what occurred. That's the observable behavior. This is also the behavior that you want changed or reinforced. So this is the thing that you're concerned with or that you're excited for. This is your opportunity. And then the I is the impact. So what is important about that behavior? Why does it matter that you need to change it or they need to reinforce it? And this impact, of course, should cover some of your intentions, but it should also be motivating to your audience. The impact is the thing that gets them to change or the thing that gets them to continue. And then A is ask. So SBI, as it states, would just be, here's the situation, here's the behavior, here's the impact of that behavior. And I'm like, okay, now what, right? So ask is what you want. What's your ask here? Is it to discuss it? Is it to change it? Is it directive? Is it collaborative discussion? What is it you're looking for? So SBI. And the biggest thing with this formula and any feedback is just information. If you think about it technically, it's just information. And in the feedback sense, especially in work, it's information that lets you know how to be successful. And so I want us to move away even from the word feedback. And of course, we're going to be using it ad nauseum today. But when you're talking to people, think about it as information, something you want to share and how you're going to share it, SBI+A.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that summary there. That really helps to clarify what makes this tool a good tool. There are lots of good feedback tools out there, though. Jaclyn, what would you say sets this tool apart from others? What makes it better than others? Why have we, or the three of us, chosen to use this model so frequently with our clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've highlighted earlier, but it's so simple. And so creative leadership's core function of it makes it just a really easy framework to apply to any situation. So I'd say it's simple and it's also really versatile. So in that there are some engineering teams will focus on like a retro and they'll have a really specific framework for that. And that's really helpful for those situations. I think what's so great about this tool is that it can be plug and play in so many different situations that it helps you kind of rinse and repeat. And there's so much going on in the world, so much to think about, something that can just be easily acronym, just play it out and be really powerful. So we really feel like it's the best tool. And then maybe it's the first tool to learn because you can't just apply it across the board. And as Chelsea said, whether it's constructive, whether it's positive, it can be used in all cases. So hands down, that's why we're starting with it and why I think it's so effective.
Yeah. And adding to that quickly, two others that you may have heard, coin or coiled, also very useful. State the context, the observation, the impact, and the next steps. Coiled. So any acronym, find the thing you connect with. We like SBI because it's shortest. So it makes it simple and probably easiest to remember, exactly as Jaclyn said. We're not saying that this is the only one you can use, right? Find one you connect to that has these elements. The elements of the formula are what is most important. Mm-hmm. And also, if you're someone who really believes in radical candor or other more theoretical concepts of feedback, these are not mutually exclusive. So if you personally want to practice radical candor, you're trying to build a culture around it at your organization, wonderful. You can do that. And still SBI is sort of your formula for how you word your radical candor feedback, right? So I love the acronyms because it's the wording that's most hard to individuals. It's not the concept, right? I love the idea of radical candor. Great. I'm going to be empathetic and radically candid with my team. What do I say now? Was like a constant thing coming up when we were coaching on these other feedback tools. And so we needed to find the actual tool. So that's where SBI, and we added a +A, comes in handy.
So it sounds a bit like it's like a Swiss Army knife of tools. You can use it in a multitude of situations and really apply it not just to traditional, if we think about what we assume a feedback conversation to be, but also other types of conversation where you're communicating something to someone else and hoping they get some value out of that. All right. Okay. So we've already alluded to some examples of how you would apply it, but Chelsea, would you like to give us a few more examples of situations in which you would apply SBI+A?
Definitely. So like anything that we'll be talking about on this podcast or even in our practices, you're applying it when you're not getting the results that you want. So if what you're doing is working for your team members, you're getting the results you want, you have a good relationship and communication with them, great. Don't break something that's not broken, right? Keep that up. But if you observe, it's normally one or two categories. One, is individuals who don't feel comfortable delivering feedback for whatever reason. It's not something they feel like they've done a lot, even though you have in your whole life. Or maybe they're just newer to management and leadership, or they have that protective hesitation is like a really big category here, where I don't want to hurt someone. I don't want them to be upset. And so that's where I find a formula is very helpful. So at least gives you a place to start to word it. So in that category, SBI can be really useful. The other category is when you're not getting the results that you want. So you see a pattern of behavior that's not changing and you've tried several times, or alternatively, someone really is on the mark a couple times and then sometimes they're missing it. Hey, use that positive feedback more, right? Really reinforce when they're on the mark and help to build a pattern of that positive behavior you're looking for. And so if you're not seeing those desired results, I'd recommend trying it. Also, if you read this formula for the first time and your answer is, I do that every time and it's not working, try it differently. Okay. So really just be thoughtful to yourself and step back and have some awareness. Am I presenting the situation as best as I can? Is it clear the context I'm talking about? Am I presenting an observable behavior? And I'm going to stress that and sound pretty wild with that every time, because that is the place I see people miss the mark the most. It's not an observable behavior. You're presenting a subjective evaluation. And so really, really push yourself there. We're going to give some examples. And then impact. Am I presenting an impact that's motivating to them? And I guess probably not, right? We'll talk about motivation more. We have resources on intrinsic motivation, but am I presenting a motivating impact? And then lastly, with ask, this goes back to situational leadership, which we just released an episode on. Your ask is your situation leadership behavior. And so how you use situational leadership in delivering your feedback could be where you're not getting the results you want. So if you're not getting the results you want in feedback conversations, go back to this tool, try to be a little bit more thoughtful and more introspective with yourself if you think you already use it perfectly.
That sounds excellent. So how about we try it out a little bit with some example situations here. I'm going to throw out some scenarios and see what you both have to say about how we could apply SBI to those situations. So Jaclyn, what would you do if, say, I'm a manager and I have a team member, Lisa, who is constantly showing up late for Monday meetings. She is every single Monday. Lisa will be late. Lisa will be late, and we all know it. And I'm her manager, and so I say to Lisa, you have to stop being late for meetings. How could I do that better? Because I'm sure that's not very productive feedback, right?
Why is this so funny? Go ahead,
Lisa.
Jaclyn. Lisa being late. The alliteration, it's great.
I know. Role playing on it. It's your gift. I think it's a perfect example. And I think it's one of those things where I almost hear a little bit in the tone of like, you're a little frustrated at this point, right? So there is that emotion that's also coming in, which, sometimes difficult conversations are because the information we're giving is difficult. Other times it's because we already have some emotion built up and it's a challenge. And maybe we've waited 4, 5, 6 weeks before we finally said something. So now it's a real pattern. But all that to say, I think going back to what Chelsea's highlighted is giving kind of just a really simple structure, then takes a little bit of the emotion out of it. Because you can say, what is the observable, objective, fly on the wall thing that's happened? And so what I would say would be an example of clearly objective, like the last 3 or 5 or how many it's been. Last 3 weeks, you've been joining our Monday morning team meeting 10 to 15 minutes past our start time. Everyone should see that to be a fact. That's a little bit of the behavior there too, right? In some cases, it could be interchanged with the situation because they are showing up late by 5 minutes. That's the behavior. But what, as Chelsea highlighted, sometimes we do miss the impact. Like, you're frustrated about that, but why does she care? Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe we think it's loose timing. And so I would communicate something about how every time you show up 10 to 15 minutes past our start time, you're missing our weekly priorities. And then I've noticed throughout the week, we're misaligned a bit on the team objectives. And so now you're kind of highlighting the ripple effect of the behavior. And then the ask, right? So it could be something collaborative, the tone matters here, going back to situational leadership. Hey, tell me what's contributing to that. Help me understand what's going on. Or it can be a little bit more directive. I would like us to all be there at 10 a.m. as a team. What do we need to do differently to make that possible? And so both cases kind of different tones, different maybe leadership approaches, but ultimately more objective and more hopefully impactful for a conversation. That's what I'd say.
I think that's absolutely excellent, because the fact is that receiving feedback is just so difficult. And the more objective the giver of the feedback can be, the easier it will be for the receiver to hear that feedback and not become defensive in that moment. Because the fact is that we don't always know what is going on in that situation. Like, we don't actually know why Lisa is late every Monday morning. She might actually have a legit reason for it. There might be something that's going on.
Who's Lisa? Am I Lisa in this scenario? I feel like we're talking about someone real.
Talking about Lisa being late to every podcast
Lisa.
meeting.
I know. I'm like, oh no. All right, I'll show up on time.
No, but I think
let's try
point.
to do that in the future.
No, I think that's what I highlight that too, because it's opening up the conversation, right? If you're entering with curiosity, it could be truly that she's dropping her kid off at 9:45 and it's really impossible, but she hasn't felt safe enough to bring it up. She feels bad, but what else can she do? It could be a whole list. It could be she's at a meeting before, and that facilitator is running long every week. And so I think that it's really helpful to, personally, the collaborative approach could be like, let's understand. And then we can hopefully get to an action that changes behavior. And then, to Chelsea's point, we can reinforce the positive behavior or keep adjusting. But exactly right. I agree with you. It helps us be a little bit more curious entering in, so it's less defensive in nature.
Exactly. All right, let's do a positive example. So we have a team member, Robin, who is communicating super well in Slack. You're seeing that Robin is using great language. Punctuation is excellent. She is just nailing it, and she is very much kind of like being thoughtful about how she is responding. She's using threads. She's doing all the things. Chelsea, you're her manager, and instead of saying, "Hey, Robin, great job on Slack this week," what could you say instead to help reinforce that positive behavior and just highlight what is actually going on there?
Yeah. First, I have to laugh because the positive feedback is for Robin, which is a family name in Honest Family. I'm like, wow, these metaphors.
It's difficult to come up with these names.
No, it's good. So Robin has been communicating really well in Slack, great punctuation, clear wording, and all I said was great job in Slack. That could be fine. This goes back to like, are you getting the results you want? The problem with that is it's not specific enough that I know what to continue doing. Maybe Robin also spent a lot of time in the random channel that week and was sending a lot of gifts and funny messages. And she's like, oh, they noticed I was putting extra effort into collaborating and building strong relationships with my team. I'm so glad that my manager has been recognizing that. I've been working really hard on that. That's not even what you're trying to reinforce, right? Which is good, but then does she even know if she's being recognized for the thing that she's been focusing on and working on? And so if what you're trying to highlight is the clear communication and the good grammar, good wording and whatnot, which is really nice in Slack because people who have a lot of typos, it slows things down. And I'm one of them. You could say something like, hey, Robin, this week in Slack, I would keep that context. I think it's probably all that this person would need. You could specify the channels or the project or the DM if you needed to. But this week in Slack, your communication has been really clear and concise. And part of that is you've had great grammar and punctuation. It's just been really clear messaging. And so that's the actual behavior, right? I'm clarifying the specific what I saw typed out. And then the impact, it's up to you. I think an impact that could be motivating could be based on the team. It allows us to work more quickly together. It allows us to touch base really easily. It allows me to read your messages in between meetings really quickly. It shows your expertise and executive presence because your communication's coming across. I don't know, whatever impact actually matters here. And then the ask, of course, is keep it up, right? I want you to keep it up, but you could dive into that deeper and do the collaborative approach. Like, what's changed? What have you been focusing on? This is so interesting. And then maybe you hear Robin has really been focused on her communication. It's important to her. And thank you so much for recognizing that. I really appreciate it. So you could use that as a time to dig a little deeper, especially if she's received feedback on communication in the past. You could just be directive and say, keep it up. You could be delegative and say, I'd love for you to inspire others to do more of that, or whatever you want. It could be a leadership opportunity. So we're taking something that seemed as simple as punctuation in Slack, right? And really elaborating on what the importance of something like that could be, both for recognition and motivation, and also for continued pattern and reinforcement of positive behavior.
I think that's just so well put, and lots of good things that you mentioned there. And just that idea of, rather than just saying good job or this should be done differently, that you're actually aiming to expand more on what it is that was actually good, or what it is that actually needs to be changed, so that that person, like we've talked about, or like you've both mentioned before, knows how to be successful. If you're just saying good job, they don't know what they're actually doing well. So I think, especially with positive feedback, it's easy to miss out on that opportunity to actually clarify what you want reinforced.
Yep.
By just
Before
saying,
you move
oh,
on,
great job.
did everyone just hear Anna nail SBI like just fluidly and organically? Like she gave me feedback on what I shared in perfect SBI. Quick highlight, keep going.
Well, you deserved some good feedback there. That was excellent. All right, so last example, Jaclyn, what if we have a team member, Joe, who is consistently missing deadlines? He's saying yes to everything, and then he's ending up missing deadlines. He's clearly over promising, overextending, and then under delivering, and it's just a problem. And we, or I, as his manager, need to give him feedback. Now, how would you approach this situation with him?
Yeah, and I think going back to the idea of, we want it to be motivating, right? Especially in that kind of situation where maybe it appears there's good intent, right? There's eagerness, there's engagement, there's motivation, ensuring that it is delivered in a way that doesn't stall, that would actually can empower it towards getting the results we want. I would say something, finding a specific example or where it's happened most recently, something like, last week you volunteered to help produce the all hands deck for us. And it was due, the Friday before the meeting. That's what's the expectation. That's what was committed to. That should be objective. I came to work on Tuesday or Monday, and it was in my inbox. I recognized it was a couple days behind the deadline. And then what's the impact? That might have another ripple effect, right? The whole leadership team was a little more crunched to review and collaborate, added some additional pressure before we were intended to deliver it on Thursday. Because there's this element of, eagerness and wanting to encourage that, again, I might consider it be a collaborative of, hey, what needs to be different next time to ensure that it can be delivered on time? Or what can we do to better support you to deliver on the deadline, and kind of understand where there's a gap? Maybe it's a skill gap. Maybe it is an expectation gap, but understanding that, then you can kind of dig deeper into maybe some of the additional actions or next steps as well.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at that and expanding there. Really, because like you said, you don't want to dampen that enthusiasm. So if you just say you're missing deadlines, you are not producing the work on time, you might, in that situation, dampen this person's enthusiasm. And it might be coming, and it seems like it's coming from a good place. So you really want to reinforce some aspects of the behavior, but change other aspects of the behavior, which is where this objectively observable truth, the impact of the actions and behaviors, really comes into an important role in that conversation. So on that note, how can we actually begin? How can our audience begin to apply this tool? Tomorrow, what could they do from tomorrow onwards to begin using this tool in the day-to-day? What are your thoughts there, Chelsea?
Yeah. So the first I would say to begin using it is to spend more time drawing awareness and observation to your intentions and your goals when you're looking to deliver feedback. So especially because we're going to have you apply this whole formula, what I don't want you to do is be like, oh, that's really easy feedback, I'm going to use the formula. Because then you're going to make something like a comma feel super big when it's like, what was a comma? Like, do we really care that much about the comma? Let's relax. Maybe it is that important because you're writing grants and the government will not accept your grant proposal if you're missing your comma. So my mother-in-law does, right? So depending on what you're doing, the importance when you apply a new feedback formula, especially if you put a lot of energy into it and then you're walking through this really structured thing, like that change could feel like a lot. So what are your intentions? What are your goals? how important is the feedback, right? Is this a recurring pattern of behavior? And sometimes small feedback that's a recurring pattern is important. Is this just something that bothers you because they're doing it differently than you would do it? Is that okay, right? Maybe it needs to be done the way you do it. Maybe it doesn't. So really be thoughtful with that before you get into applying this. Perhaps also think about talking with your team members about feedback and about this being something that you're working on. What I would not recommend, because it's seen as a trigger, we'll talk about SCARF later, which is a trigger for threat awareness that allows people to not behave the way you want. I would not recommend opening with, I'd like to give you some feedback. I'm trying a new feedback formula. Can I try that now? It sounds like that's a really thoughtful thing to do, but what probably is going to happen on the other end is like, oh God, feedback, crap, no, and that's not great, right? I don't want to hear it. I can't listen to it, la, 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 la. Like that's what your audience may be doing depending on how they receive and perceive threats. Maybe not, right? So instead, outside of the feedback delivery, I'm working on my feedback. I think I could be more specific to give people better information and know how they're successful. So if you hear me communicating in different ways, it's something I'm practicing to help out my team, right? It's something I'm practicing to help us all communicate more effectively, better align on expectations, right? Then go ahead and practice it live. What I always recommend, instead of saying, I want to give you feedback, I love getting permission. Say what you're going to say. I'd like to talk to you about the presentation we did last week. Is now a good time? I have some notes. I have some ideas. I have some thoughts. Right? Drop the F word. You can use it way earlier to say, how do you like to receive? How do you like to discuss feedback? Here's how I like to do it. But however you learned the F word as a child growing up, I want you to now replace it with the word feedback. The F word, don't use it. I don't want to hear it. Just say what you really mean. I want to talk to you about meetings on Mondays and, you know, the start time and how that's working for your schedule. When's a good time to have that conversation? Right? So totally you can get approval. Just say what you're saying. Don't use code words, right? Talk about the information. And then from there, give yourself grace. Look for small iterative changes. Look to see if they're receiving things better. Look to see if they're actually understanding the information you're giving them. Look to see if at least they're aware of the context more, right? If you have this huge pattern of behavior that you're looking to break and change, I guarantee you the first time you have this feedback conversation, it's not going to work. So instead, set a benchmark, really set a timeline. This is what 10 looks like. This is where I want them to be. They're at a 3 today. How can I start to get them to a 4, right? Look for that iterative improvement in the feedback you're giving. And it may not even be them changing their behavior. Maybe your iterative improvement is you just practicing the formula. And then congratulate yourself. Your audience hasn't fixed anything yet, but you at least know that you're practicing something more thoughtfully and you're trying and you're working and you're experimenting. Think about it like an experiment.
Right. Yeah, okay. So intentions, goals, then give the thoughtful feedback with and potentially first ask if you can give the feedback without using the word feedback. Key point here. And then observe how things are going and track that and congratulate yourself on actually beginning to practice giving more feedback. That sounds really good. Jaclyn, what are your thoughts here? Did you have anything that Chelsea might not have mentioned or anything to add then?
I mean, I think that's spot on. I feel like that in itself is a great formula to work through. The only thing I'd encourage in that I talk to a lot of managers who are hesitant because of that thing we talked about earlier. There's the response from the other party, right? And we don't have control over that, but we are maybe hesitant about our own SCARF triggers of like, they're going to be offended, they're going to get defensive. And so if it's helpful, just a little nugget, maybe start with the Slack, the positive opportunities, and just give yourself, going back to the idea of grace, like give yourself a little bit of easy wins and practicing where it's going to most likely have the least defensiveness. So if that's helpful at all, I think Chelsea's goal is you're going to have the best longer term results, but if you need to have a really soft win, start with something positive and try it there.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds like a good beginning. All right. So how about tracking of results? How do we know that we're actually doing a good job here, that it's working? How are we tracking success?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in the beginning. The whole intention behind this is to have a desired change or reinforcing a behavior we want. And so that conceptually is the thing we're going to be tracking towards. And Chelsea highlighted earlier, I think this might be almost overlooked, is what is the end goal? Like, what is the desired change? And I think it isn't about 0 to 100. It is about progress. And so the idea, even breaking it down to an incremental improvement, like from 3 to 4, from 4 to 5. So think about how the desired change looks one step forward, what ultimately is the goal, yes, and then how do you watch it? And that will help you also make those adjustments, like we were talking about earlier. You can make those adjustments each time you're giving some feedback, adjusting to it so that you can see if you're actually getting to the desired change that you're ultimately hoping for. And then I think there's something to be said about this too, is awareness and some self-reflection too. Like, what am I doing? Is there anything I can do to adjust? Am I taking these opportunities to deliver SBI+A? And so a little bit of that kind of manager self-reflection can be powerful too, to track.
Yeah, I really like that. So really defining what it is you are trying to track, really understanding what those incremental changes that you're looking for are, and even naming the incremental changes so that you can see when that situation goes from a 3 to a 4, and then just drawing more awareness to what your goals and intentions are, as well as then how you're actually seeing that progress and what you are doing to make that progress happen. All right, so I think we are coming to the end of our allotted time for today. What one takeaway would each of you want our audience to have after listening to this conversation? Jaclyn, how about we start with your takeaway?
Yeah, I think I would just remind people that this is delivery of information, and that if we take the F word out of it, is a powerful tool, right? Communicating, and it can truly be used for engagement, for motivation, for development and growth. And I just would really want to empower leaders and managers to think of it as that. This is one of the most powerful tools to actually build to high performance for your team. And the more you practice it, the more you incorporate it, the more powerful it can be for others, and not just for you as a practice as well. So practice it often, weekly, as often as you can.
For sure, that sounds really good. So Chelsea, what about you?
I'm gonna have 2. Sorry.
Oh, well, good thing we have a little bit of time here. So
yeah, I have them 2. The first is really try to get down to the observable behavior. And I know when you hear what that means, you may think it's simple, but as soon as the feedback gets complex, is hearsay feedback, is more how people interact with each other, or like social interpersonal feedback, it's going to be very hard to define that behavior. And it is observable if anyone else could see it and agree that it happens, right? And it's also not subjective. So this is not an opinion, and this is not a belief. This is an observable truth. This is an observable behavior. And it's hard to do. It's hard for me to do. So practice with someone else. This is where a coach comes in handy, really big, right? To have someone to practice observable behaviors with. And then the extra thing I would add is play with intention, play with impact. Look for an impact that is motivating. Look for an impact that evokes change, or that really motivates someone to continue a pattern. And be thoughtful. Make sure the impact is not bigger than the feedback. And I've heard a lot of personal preferences from managers or leaders where they want their team to change. They really can't nail a good impact because there's no impact there, right? It's like, I just want them to be like me. And they're not, which is what's beautiful. So be thoughtful that the impact is meaningful and it matters. It's also not bigger than the feedback itself, right? It's like relative and makes sense. And it's going to be a tough one to play with. There's so much scale and so much variability. And again, another place where work with a friend, work with a manager, work with a peer, work with a coach to really explore the impacts that could get someone moving or keep them going in the right direction.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing all this valuable knowledge with our audience. On the topic of feedback, we'll be back with another episode relating to feedback. It'll be more on the receiving feedback kind of spectrum of things, where Chelsea will be talking to her good friend Chris about how tasting beer and receiving feedback are really very similar. So that should be an interesting conversation and experience for anyone listening into that episode. But before that, our next episode, we'll be talking about clarifying expectations and why expectations matter so much. And that is yet another one of our kind of favorite topics, and one of those topics that we've just seen over and over again through all the hundreds of hours of coaching that we have all done how important that topic is and how important it is to clarify expectations and understand what we're actually talking about when we're talking about expectations. So that should be a good episode. So join us all for that one. And for now, thank you so much, and join us again for Coaches Take on Work.
Thanks for the feedback.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to Coaches Take on Work through your favorite streaming service so you don't miss a future episode. We are Coaches Take on Work, and for this episode's hot take, play with intention, play with impact. Look for an impact that is motivating. Look for an impact that evokes change or that really motivates someone to continue a pattern.